Welcome back to Hardball. The Trayvon Martin shooting has put a bright light on Florida's Stand Your Ground law, whether or not it applies in this case or not. And it's raising questions about the law's origin in Florida, where it came from, and also into 24 other states that have similar laws to it. A Time magazine report in 2008 said these right to defend yourself laws were sweeping the country, and that was no coincidence. As our guest John Nichols reports, a group called the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC for short, used the Florida law as a model to push stand your ground type legislation across the country. As I said, 24 states have something like this. Ben Jealous is president, of course, of the NAACP. Thank you for joining us, Ben, which released a report in December that calls ALEC, that says ALEC is also behind state-level anti-voter laws. John Nichols is Washington correspondent for The Nation magazine, who has written extensively on this organization called ALEC and, of course, the Stand Your Ground law itself. Gentlemen, I want you to listen to something right now. A variation on the Stand Your Ground law passed in the state of Texas after the Florida law paved the way. It became the linchpin argument for a man named Joe Horn. Let's listen to a portion of a pretty scary 911 call from September 2007 in which he, Mr. Horn, describes two men breaking into a neighbor's home.
Why don't you listen to me carefully, okay?
Yes.
I've got officers coming out there. I don't want you to go outside that house. And I don't want you to have that gun in your hand when those officers are poking around over there.
I understand that, okay, but I have a right to protect myself too, sir, and
yes,
you understand that.
Yes,
and the laws have been changed in this country since September the 1st, and you know it and I know it. I have a right to protect myself. He's coming out the window right now. I got to go, buddy. I'm sorry, but he's coming out the window.
Don't go out the door. Mr. Horn. Mr. Horn.
They just stole something. I'm going out the window. I'm sorry. I ain't going to let them get away with it. They stole something. They got a bag of something.
I don't want you going outside, Mr. Horn.
Well, here it goes, buddy. You hear the shotgun clicking, and I'm going.
Don't go outside. I'm going to get on your radio, Jeff.
No, you're dead.
Well, John Nichols, that's pretty graphic. That's the live account on a 911 tape of the killing of two men who were caught, well, it looks like they were caught burglarizing a house, but killed and gunned down dead by a civilian who decided to use this law, and he was defended in court on the basis of this law. John?
Absolutely, and you're going to find you're going to find cases like this in places across the country. There was a case in Wisconsin.
But how did he say that he was defending himself? Just a minute for a second. Let's get back to the case, the law and how it's used. Stand your ground means if you're in danger of somebody beating you up, it may be relevant to the case we've been watching, Trayvon Martin, or you're in danger for your life because somebody's coming at you, beating you up, whatever, threatening you with a gun or whatever, and you're outside your home. How does this relate when he went after them?
The issue here is that there are several different variations on stand your ground laws. There's a castle doctrine law, which suggests that you can protect your property and its environs right out to the sidewalk. Stand your ground is more something that takes it out into the streets. The bottom line on this, Chris, is that the interpretation kind of goes to the gunman. The person with the gun can say, I felt threatened. I felt that I was endangered. And prosecutors, police officers, judges who traditionally have been able to interpret statements like that really are robbed of the ability to do it by these laws, which essentially say there's a blanket immunity. If the shooter says they felt threatened or they felt endangered, they are protected.
Well, how does a
against
guy feel endangered by somebody robbing a neighbor? No, just a minute. I don't want to go too far with your case till I get the facts. Mr. Nichols, how do you justify self-defense even under the broadest definition under the statute if you're shooting down like you're pretending you're a lawman chasing an escaping felon? He was acting like a police officer, and maybe an officer does in some cases have a right to shoot a fleeing felon. But in this case, explain to me how he used that as a self-defense motive.
I don't think it's credible to use as a self-defense motive. I think it's an almost obscene extension of the traditional protection for self-defense. Unfortunately, this is what has happened in states across the country. We have had instances where people have shot in circumstances where, by just about any reasonable measure, you would say it was not necessary to use lethal force. And the person who did the shooting has been let off the hook on the argument that they felt threatened. And all they have to do is say they felt threatened, and that's what happens.
Okay, let me go to my friend to Ben Jealous. Sir, thank you for coming from the NAACP. You've got so many, so many pans on the fire that you're concerned about in the country. You are concerned about this group, apparently, American Legislative Exchange Council, which pushes these laws. Tell me what you know about them and why you're concerned.
This is a group that, frankly, when we took a look at them, we hope that maybe it was like the Chamber of Commerce, that started off sort of mom and apple pie, and then just moved steadily to the further and further, to the right. But actually, what we found is that, no, they were founded really for ill intent. I mean, this is a group whose founder has said, our best interest is when the voting populace is constrained, when the number of people who can vote in this country goes down. And case after case, they're just on the wrong side. They're super extreme. And this wild, wild west law that they passed, frankly, Chris, if someone made a 911 call from the frontier in like 1880, that's what it would sound like. Right? So, it sort of raises the question, why are so many corporations supporting a group that is trying to shrink the number of people who can vote in this country and who is out there pushing these sort of superpowered laws that let people gun each other down in our streets?
Well, let me ask John again. Do you think our self-defense laws, as we've understood them through common law, like suppose somebody runs a small bodega or something in a neighborhood that's tough, and a couple guys come in with hoods on or whatever, or not hoods, but they come in with masks on. They're standing in front of them. They're armed. They got guns pointed at them. He pulls out his half-sawed-off shotgun and kills the both of them. Most people would say that's self-defense because these guys are pointing guns at him, and they may finish him off as they leave with the money. He has no reason to believe his life's safe. So that's, to me, self-defense. Aren't the self-defense laws enough that we have on the books? I'm making the argument for that. Is that case? Is that true?
It's absolutely true. In fact, Chris, in working on stories on this particular variation of the Castle Doctrine law and these stand your ground laws, I've looked at the states where they've been passed and tried to figure out whether there was any case or any public outcry that justified going beyond the traditional protections that are in common law that have existed since before the founding of the United States. And in most cases, there aren't any reasons to go here. The reason that state after state has gone here is because the American Legislative Exchange Council in 2005, after Florida passed its law, developed model legislation that, with the support of the NRA and other groups, it has pushed in state after state across this country, not to respond to public outcry and not to respond to specific incidents, but rather to dramatically extend what I think of as a fantasy of where gun rights ought to go.
Ben, I want to ask you, Mr. Jost, one last question.
Sure.
Because you do represent such a hollowed, obviously revered organization. Is there a sense on the part of minorities that this law is anti-minority, that these laws are meant to somehow be anti-minority, these stand your ground laws?
Well, certainly it seems that for many, the fear that they have is of black men. And really, that's what's at the heart of the Trayvon case, is that this is a case that, where a young black man was stalked on the street, attacked on the street, shot in cold blood, not because of what he was doing, but because of what he looked like. And so when you empower...
Well, that's, by the way, that's your argument. What you're putting together there, sir, is 3 or 4 things that are in dispute. Let's make that clear, but go ahead.
No, look...
No, he did track him. We know that because of the surveillance tape. We know that part. We don't know what kind of a confrontation occurred. You say in cold blood. Well, that's a phrase that you're using here.
Right, Chris, he got out of his car with a gun.
Yeah, that's true. We know that.
He
had the gun. He had the gun.
And he
had the gun,
on
a
the
concealed weapon. Yes, he did. He had the concealed weapon. But you don't know what happened, do we?
Look, what we do know is what happened till about 10 seconds before, and we know that the cops said, "Stay in your car."
I know, we know all that.
Yes,
I'm with you on that far.
And we know he was following him in the car. So what I'm saying is, right up until 10 seconds before, and we know Trayvon's calling his girlfriend and saying, "There's a strange guy who's following me."
Yeah, we know that.
That's in that last, when you read the law seems to say if you're followed, if you're stalked, if somebody attacks you, if they pull out a gun, you can use equal and opposite force. It doesn't seem to say that if you go out and you attack somebody with a gun and then you get scared, you can shoot him and kill him. But what we're seeing as we dig into this is that we've seen like 2 drug dealers.
Okay, we're having. I can't have the case here.
Violence.
We don't know he drew his gun on the young man before he killed him. We don't know how that happened. We know that, of course, in the course of some kind of confrontation, the guy used his firearm lethally. We know all that. We know how it began. We know how it ended. There is a middle part, Ben. You and I have got to learn more about, I think. Anyway,
sure,
thank you so much.
Seconds.
I've got yeah, well, a lot of hell obviously was unleashed in that 10 seconds. Thank you, sir, Ben Jealous, sir, and thank you, John Nichols, for that great report. The Hardball Sideshow is coming up next. You're watching it. Hardball on MSNBC.